how to track job cost accurately. Tracking job cost after a job is done is kind of like reviewing the crash report instead of just wearing a seatbelt. Accurate job costing is less about more paperwork, and it's more about having fewer surprises throughout the job and after the job's complete. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how to track a job report within an acronym of SLIME so that you've got clarity on the profitability of every job in your construction business. I will never, ever, ever forget this one situation where we were working with a large commercial contractor, and they were actually a subcontractor to very large GCs, and they did about $100 million every year in business, and they were a stalwart business that had been around for decades. And I walked in a modern era, and I asked the director of construction, hey, show me that next bid that you're doing, and he pulls out a yellow legal pad. He had done the entire estimate, and this one was the biggest they had ever done. It was about a $45 million estimate for one project. He had done the entire estimate on a yellow legal pad. You think I had any confidence that there was going to be actual job costing happening in this job if they were actually to get awarded the job? By God's grace, they were not awarded the job. It's probably good for them because the job costing in the back end would have been really difficult, and honestly, they probably would have lost their shirts on the job. Now, I know some people are thinking, God, but a $45 million job, man, think of all the money they could have made. Yeah, maybe, unless the job would have cost them $46 million, and then they would have lost money and more as time goes on. So in many of the jobs that they get, the owner asks, well, how do we do on the job? And everybody kind of looks at the owner and is like, we don't really know. What does that mean? They're not job costing. That's the whole point. Job costing in its very basic format is this. Is this job profitable or is it not? Another way to put it, is this job profitable? Did we make money? Or not did we lose money, but did we spend money to have to go get this? Thus, did we lose money? So let's walk through a procedural view of job costing to help you to understand how to best do it. The very first thing we've got to do in a healthy job cost is make sure we estimate correctly at the launch. So the estimate is going to be the foundational element of a good job cost. If we don't have a healthy estimate, then we're going to have an unhealthy job cost as time goes on, because everything we do from here on out as it relates to costing out that job is going to be based and determined on the difference between what is the actual versus what was the budgeted or the estimate that we put in place. So in order to do job costing effectively across the job, we need to get it right at the start of the job, which means setting up your job costing system. I do want to draw your attention down. If you go into the description link below, there's a link down there. And I don't want to just show you how to do job costing. This is one process of 50 or hundreds of different processes that exist in your construction business. What I want to do is teach you how to build a system for your entire construction business. So make sure you click on the link in the description below once you're done with this video and go watch that. It's a long form masterclass where I will sit down. You need to take notes and I'll walk you through how to actually build a construction business that will run and grow with or without you, where job costing is a healthy foundation of that. All right, so we've set the foundation, made a commitment that we're going to give a healthy estimate. Now, part of this estimate is determining the SLIME that happens throughout the entire job. The SLIME is what makes up sort of the cocktail of the cost of goods sold. So when we have the contract value of the job, this is the revenue that we're going to bring in, minus the cost of goods, then what we're left with is our gross profit. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that term because it makes it sound like it's your profit, but I still like to go with its gross profit, meaning it's gross. It's got other stuff in it that we need to get out, like the overhead and expenses. And once we get that out and remove our overhead and any other expenses that we have, then that's when we can get down to understanding our true profit of what that looks like. Now, that's still EBITDA profit, so it's earnings before interest and tax and depreciation and amortization and all that stuff, but we've got a better understanding. Now, in order to understand this from a macro perspective, which you find on your profit and loss statement, we need to get all the component parts to understand individually or micro job by job if it's actually going to be profitable for you. So how do we do that? Again, we're going to start with a healthy foundation of a solid estimate. Then we're going to understand our cost of goods by removing our SLIME. Now there's a left side and a right side to this. So if we broke down your cost of goods into two major categories, it's going to be the people categories and it's going to be the non-people categories over here. So the people categories are things like subcontractors or just general labor that you bring in for that particular job. So anything that's a cost of goods is a cost that has been brought in because that job exists. In other words, if that job didn't exist, theoretically, you don't have these costs that are associated with it. The challenge with overhead and expenses is those are more carried costs, meaning you actually carry those whether you have work or not. That's why it's important to be able to job cost and understand the slime of that job. Now, the non-people side of your slime are materials and equipment. So you have subcontractors, labor, and the materials and equipment. And the equipment usually comes in two categories. It's equipment that is owned by someone else, rental agency or whatever, or equipment that you own because you thought you could make some money off of self-performing either with the labor or with the equipment. That brings up another facet of job costing. Sometimes we have many contractors that self-perform, meaning they have labor as full-time employees as W-2, but they cost code them to jobs based on the job. That means that they just have to be busy all the time in order to keep and to carry those costs. So you need to understand what your labor is going to be if they are in-house W-2 or if you're subcontracting them and they're a true cost of goods outside of that. One little side note on that, sometimes people have W-2 labor that they cost code as a cost of goods because they're labor, non-management, and if they didn't have work, they wouldn't have that labor that's in there. And so you need to make sure that you've identified what it is that you have. So when you've set a foundation with a healthy estimate and you've put your costs according to the bid packages and all that, then we map that out and throughout the entire project with a frequency of at least weekly, we actually recommend daily, but at least weekly, you're identifying your slime costs, subs, labor, material, and equipment. You're matching that to the contract value as you go. And by the way, I've got another video that talks about WIP reporting of underbilling and overbilling. And so the overbilling and underbilling will affect your cash flow. So make sure you go watch that video. It's super important. But every week and preferably every day, you're tracking what these costs are going out. You're comparing them to the contract value. And so you'll start to see this sort of visual that goes out. So imagine this block is the contract value. And then my cost of goods rise as I spend the money and I send invoice out and it shrinks my gross margin. That's job costing in its essence, but the job cost won't work unless you've got a healthy foundation pre-job, you've got ongoing discipline during the job, and then you do a proper closeout. What does a closeout look like? You're basically taking your estimated and you're looking at it in contrast to your actual. And so the delta between the two is what you're looking at to see if that job was profitable or not. That gives you a healthy code for what that job looks like so that you can determine, are these the type of jobs that we want to receive in the future, or are these jobs we want to kind of stay away from, or was there some other factor going on? You can learn so much about the health of your business if you'll just do proper job costing. And I know sometimes when you hear about some of this stuff, you're like, this is too much work, I don't want to do it. Here's the reality. Many contractors and construction business owners are in chaos. And our aim, the reason we're laying these educational videos out to you, so that you can be liberated from that chaos to make time for the things that matter most.